My name's Andrew Willocks. I'm the Horticultural Specialist here at RHS Garden Harlow Carr. At the moment we're actually in the Nectar Bar in the Learning Centre garden. At this time of the year, in the autumn, there's a lot of things we can do in the garden. Quite often people think there's just leaves to rake up, but actually there's quite a lot of preparation we can do prior to the winter period. But there are a lot of things that are still quite vibrant and colourful, very, very important for bees and butterflies. We've got the Verbena bonariensis and also the Rudbeckia at the background, and we've got Echinacea as well, Purpurea, which is both excellent providers of nectar for bees and butterflies towards the end of their season. There are a number of things you can actually do in the garden to actually help our beneficial insects and also wildlife that will also be still quite evident in the garden at this time of the year. This is a bug box. It can actually be used by mason bees as well, but also it's an ideal refuge for ladybirds and lacewings that are in the process of now looking for a dry, warm site over the cold winter period. Also, we've got similar boxes to the bug boxes. These are actually hibernation boxes for butterflies, and quite often butterflies will try to get into bird boxes and things like that, and unfortunately if a bird goes in there, unfortunately the butterfly doesn't last particularly long. So we've got these specialist boxes where the butterfly actually goes in and nothing can actually get to it, and it will stay in there over the winter period, perfectly dry, clear of frost and snow, and eventually it'll emerge hopefully by the following March and April. And if it's positioned in the area of a vegetable garden or a flowering part of the garden, heavily flowering part of the garden, they're there to get out and start feeding up on nectar as soon as possible. This time of the year it's very, very important to think about next spring. There's a succession of bulbs, of course, we can start planting at this time of the year. Crocus, snowdrops. A little bit later on in the year we've got tulips as well, so a succession of bulbs is quite important. So it's quite important to start planting snowdrops now for January, crocus about end of February into March and April, and then of course later on in the year you've got narcissus and tulips, which will continue the colour and vibrancy in the garden right through until the end of May. So it's very important to have a succession of bulbs. You can do this by layer planting into containers, and so you don't have to scatter them necessarily all over the garden. If you've got a very, very small garden, just layer them in a container, and then you've got your succession of bulbs to provide nectar and pollen from January right through until May. Also, wildflowers. You can actually sow a lot of wildflower seed now. Very, very important at this time of the year to look at an area. It needs to be a sheltered site, a very, very sunny site, free draining site. And I've got two very popular wildflowers here that will quite often be found in the countryside. We've got ragged robin and oxeye daisies. Excellent provider of nectar and pollen to bees and butterflies from May right throughout the summer period. You sow those now. Also, as well as sowing wildflower seed, you can actually acquire plug plants from specialist growers. Quite often there are nurseries in that provide these plugs, which will have been sown generally early on this year from seed naturally collected, and also seed that's actually been sown and gathered as early as the end of July. And we tend to just use these little narrow plug plant holders, and we put generally seed sowing mix in, about 3 to 4 seeds in each plug, and in this case we've actually got red campion and ragged robin as well. Very, very easy to germinate. Germinates normally within about 3 to 4 weeks. So these were actually sown at the end of July, and as you can see by end of September they're producing very, very substantial plugs. Quite important when you do plant them, you can plant these actually into your lawn, cut your grass back quite hard, and then you just tease the roots out like that, and then you get a fork or a trowel, just part the turf, put them in, lever them back in, and then you can more or less forget about them, because quite often by planting them in the spring, that's another alternative, but you may have problems with having to water them on a regular basis. So it's probably a better time of the year really now to get your plugs in, but either in the autumn or the spring, very, very good time to get your wildflower meadow going, and plugs are probably the quickest way of establishing a wildflower meadow with a combination of wildflower seed. There are a number of boxes you can put up at this time of the year. Bat boxes are also very useful to the gardener, and also bird boxes as well. Good time of the year. At this time of the year, we are allowed to go in and clean our boxes. If the box is damaged, good time of the year to review and get a brand new box as well. A lot of different types and models are available in most garden centres and most nursery outlets. Choose a site that's in a easterly sheltered position. You don't want to put your nest box up in a south facing direction, otherwise during the heat of the day in the summer it won't be a particularly nice experience for the birds. So keep your box about 2 meters off the ground, on a wall or on a tree, but certainly not in to an exposed site. So generally in a sheltered easterly position, and hopefully you'll get some more beneficial forms of wildlife into the garden, possibly in the shape of blue tits coming in and cleaning out all the troublesome aphids in the garden. This part of the garden actually is referred to as Hedgehog Street. It's a series of gardens that we've actually built with recommendations from the Hedgehog Trust, and also designs that were actually put forward by a number of schools and educational bodies who wanted to participate in this. The prime objective is to identify the important things that we need to take into consideration to make your garden hedgehog friendly. At this time of the year, hedgehogs will be looking for a refuge over the winter period to hibernate. There are a number of things you can do. You can actually buy hedgehog boxes. You can make these yourself. It's quite important to have a relatively long entrance to the box, because you don't want other animals getting in and disturbing them. It's also quite important, if you've got water in your garden, to make sure that there's a natural access to any hedgehogs that may fall into the water. So it's very, very important to take those things into consideration. Of course, keep feeding them at this time of the year as well with specialised hedgehog feed, and to build their fat reserves up so they can hibernate comfortably over the winter period. It's very, very important for them to put on that extra fat. Otherwise, if they're below those levels of weight, which are quite important to make sure that the hedgehog survives the winter period, it could be quite harmful to the hedgehog. So it's very important to put out extra feed, hedgehog boxes, certainly in areas that are quieter parts of the garden where they're not going to be disturbed, and also take into consideration any water courses you might have, and make sure there's steps or a natural access for the hedgehogs to get out of any ponds and water. Autumn is a very, very important time for the gardener, because as well as bringing in the harvest and reflecting on the pluses and minuses and the achievements that the gardener has made throughout the growing season, it's also a great time to prepare for next year and also the winter periods. Some of the items I've shown today, now is an ideal time to put these things up, because then you're actually providing a provision for next year's pest controls, if you like. So what we're trying to do in our wildlife garden is to reduce certainly the amount of chemicals, which really we shouldn't be using at all. And by adding more wildlife into your garden, you're going to have a natural ecosystem in your garden, so that everything is protected and looked after in your garden for next year. But also it's very, very important, by providing these boxes and providing all these facilities, we're actually looking after the wildlife themselves as well. Incidentally, a lot of the boxes can be purchased at all RHS shops and outlets.